and it's great to have you here. Maybe before, I don't know, Veale, as we sort of promote people inside, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, Nelson, kind of your own entrepreneurial journey, and include your visit to Cleveland as part of Veale as part of the conversation.
Okay, definitely. So I'm Colombian. I actually lived in the UK for a long time, and then went to university in the UK. And then I came back to Bogota, and I set up Project Colombia. This was about 5 years ago that we set up Project Colombia with the intention to work with communities at the beginning and entrepreneurs. So we had at the beginning an accelerator, a business accelerator. We were working with the community, not just in Bogota, but in the towns around Bogota and Medellin. We were training entrepreneurs, and we were also providing seed capital for all the entrepreneurs. And then this is how I actually applied for Veale, for the State Department in the United States, and I got selected. And then I went to the United States. I spent, I think it was about 4 or 5 weeks in Cleveland, which I absolutely love it. Actually, I loved it. I got to meet really, really amazing people like Michael Goldberg, and I met lots of businesses, lots of like startups as well. And then on my return, I had done a master's degree in innovation. So we decided to set up an innovation agency. So for the last 2.5 years, we have currently an innovation agencies. So basically what we do, we help companies to create and develop new business solutions, to transform their teams, adopt new technologies, and overall to encourage creativity and innovation culture within organizations in Colombia. So this is what we do right now. But yeah, so my experience in Cleveland was fantastic.
And remind me, were you with an organization kind of as part of the placement in Cleveland? Who were you working with?
I was with Danielle at OCDI or something.
ECDI.
Yes, yeah. That was great. Danielle was fantastic. She was showing me around Cleveland, and through her, I met lots of like startups. She was setting up meetings for me as well. So I was going around, like best practices as well, new technologies. So yeah, so it was a great experience. So after Cleveland, we went to Washington, and we had a big reunion with all the Latin American counterparts. We were at the State Department, and then we came back. But yeah, so overall, the experience at Veale was fantastic. We had the support from the embassy here in Bogota, and we're still in touch. So it was not just a program of 1 month, or actually two months, but it was, I would say, that a long-lasting experience. Until now, we keep in touch with all the entrepreneurs that were part of it, not just from Colombia, but all over Latin America as well.
Great. I was just going to ask you, just kind of in an update, I'm sure there's probably going to be questions about the impact of the crisis, and a lot of like the relaunch of our MOOC is around, when we started a lot of our conversations about learning about entrepreneurship and learning about the ecosystem in Colombia, obviously we weren't all in the crisis. So I'm sort of curious if maybe you could just sort of start off before we open it up to questions, kind of give an update on what's happening with coronavirus in Colombia, what's happening with businesses, and then we can open up to questions.
Hello, can you hear me?
Were you able to hear it, Nelson?
Yes, I lost you for a bit. Yes, okay. Sorry. Yes.
Give us a COVID-19 crisis update from the Colombian perspective.
Well, yeah, of course. It's been a shock, and not just for Colombians, but for all entrepreneurs around the world. But I think people are getting together, I think people are getting together. People are quite optimistic about the new opportunities that might arise from this. So I do think, obviously, we will discuss it a little bit further once Veale, because, and she's got some questions as well. But we were thinking, or everyone is that digital economy, how a lot of people were not really into it. And after this, we all have to get on it, there has to be a digital transformation in Colombia. There has to be more connectivity, so people start doing it in the new ways. Because imagine if there is another crisis, what will happen to all those businesses, not just in Colombia, around the world? The option is not collapse; it's just reinvent ourselves. So there's been a shock. There's been some shock, but I think there's a lot of talk from the government perspective as well. The government has been passing, issuing some laws that will help, that are helping entrepreneurs in Colombia, providing loans, helping tenants, people that are renting places not to get thrown out. So some of the tariffs has been frozen, so, and no entrepreneurs or people cannot get evicted, during this crisis. But we will talk a little bit further. But yeah, right now it's been shocking. It's been, we don't really know the overall impact in terms of the economic impact, but I think we're preparing ourselves, and there is definitely a new talk on we need to transform, we need to reinvent ourselves, we need to innovate.
Great, thank you, Nelson. So to kind of get us started, and I apologize that I missed the beginning, to kind of give us some perspective on all of the changes with COVID-19, can you kind of describe what the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Colombia was like prior to the pandemic, the key players and the different ways that it was organized, whether that involves the government, philanthropists, NGOs, etc.
Yep. So Colombia was doing quite well up until last year. In fact, Colombia, one of the fastest economies in the region, we were growing at 3.3% last year. So obviously this was helping for more startups to make it. And we were, after Chile, Mexico, and Colombia, we are kind of the strongest community in terms of the startup world. So we were last year. In fact, the World Economic Forum chose Medellin, which is the second biggest city in Colombia, as the main base of the fourth industrial revolution in Latin America. So that was good. That was obviously for, to bring new technologies and to start this new debate about the digital economy and the new technologies. And since 2012, the national government has been setting up different organizations to foster innovation, entrepreneurship. So I'll talk about, a few organizations that are quite important. Impulsa is one of them, for training, seed capital, hackathons in different regions, of the country. Apps.co is also a government effort, but this one specializes in digital businesses. So basically they help you validate business models and they connect you with investors and with the ecosystem, really. In terms of the private sector, we have some foreign venture, capital. I don't know if you guys have heard of First Rock Capital, Magma Partners, Polymath Ventures. They're all here. So last year, I think I would say that, like I said, since 2012, it's getting stronger. In terms of universities, each university, because I'm in Bogota, so I know about Bogota. So, the majority of universities tend to have own entrepreneurship institutes. So they offer trade, again, they provide seed capital, and they connect student entrepreneurs with venture capital and with the government, Actually, right now we're working with a university. It's called La Sabana University. We currently are training students on innovation methodologies and the fourth industrial revolution, And in terms of the co-working spaces, there's been an upcoming trend of having co-working spaces like WeWork, Impact Hub, and many more local co-working spaces. So yeah, it was quite strong prior to the COVID-19. Hopefully it will remain the same after all these crises happen, finishes.
Yeah, keep our fingers crossed for you.
Yeah.
So, and I think you probably already shared a little bit about yourself and your journey and what you're doing. But in terms of the Colombian ecosystem, where have you felt supported personally within your business, or where have you felt gaps within the Colombian ecosystem prior to COVID-19?
Yeah. To be honest, we have never had direct support from the government, but I have friends who have participated in some government initiatives. It's becoming better. The training, I think the government or the ecosystem needs to improve. It's like the training, the quality of the training, how we can actually train people to think differently. How can we actually prepare people to be ready for the fourth industrial revolution? So I think, it's there. We need to improve it a little bit more. And also the follow-up. Sometimes, get support, financial support, but the follow-up could be improved, I think that mentor process is very, very important. Is there, which is good, but I think if we want to be leaders in Latin America, we need to improve the training and the follow-up, not leaving the entrepreneurs alone. As entrepreneurs, we know that every day is different for us. One day we're doing very well, we feel like on top of the world. The next day, hey, we have COVID-19, So, so I think what it could be improved is the training and the follow-up. This is the gaps that I have identified.
Great, thank you. So diving more into how things are changing with COVID-19, you kind of gave us a little bit about what's going on in Colombia with, renting and all of that, but how has the entrepreneurial ecosystem responded to COVID-19?
Okay, so
what everyone's probably dying to know.
Yes, so again, it was shock, but after that, we need to respond to the crisis. So again, the government and other organizations are offering. They have launched like loans with low interest rates. I talked about the rent. I know like the investment part is being slowed down. Actually, as far as I know, I have some friends that were competing for capital and stuff, and they were looking for capital, but they haven't got it yet because with what the impact is going to be. So, the investment part has been suspended temporarily, as far as I know. In terms of training, because, there was a lot of physical training within the community. At the beginning was suspended. Actually, we had some contracts there which got suspended. But we also know that in the last few days, we have to adapt. So some of the training is being offered online. So that's one response. The Chambers of Commerce of Bogota, they have introduced an e-commerce platform for entrepreneurs that do not have their own websites. So I think that's quite good. Some companies do not have like websites or like social media, but this is one of the initiatives by the Chambers of Commerce of Bogota. There have also been new apps developed and new community-based projects that are being created, to help vulnerable people, to ensure people have access to food and medicine. So this is, something that's coming out positive, from the crisis. There are also hackathons. There are also hackathons by the government, the private sector, and entrepreneurs to find solutions to current challenges brought by COVID-19. So this is some of the things that are happening right now in Colombia.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing. We actually have a question from one of our people listening in, William. So as you're talking about investors, the question is around angel investors and philanthropists. Do you think those are potential gaps within the ecosystem that have either developed with this COVID-19 crisis or something that previously was a gap? You mentioned the investors pausing on a lot of the investments right now. So now, or is it something that is more aligned with the global crisis?
prior COVID-19, we had some angel investors, but this is not, I think this is one of the gaps right now in Colombia. We need more. We need more angel investors. And this, I'm talking about previous COVID-19. So there is a gap. Thank you. I think it was William Dyer. Thank you very much for bringing up that question. I left it out, I'm sorry. But yeah, we do not have, as far as I know, the amount of angel investors that we could have, or we would like to have. But I do feel we will need angel investors, obviously, that play fair, that actually want to have the entrepreneur, and obviously that there is a win-win situation. So there's a gap in the market, for angel investors. So if you guys know any angel investors out there, because the startup world in Colombia is definitely up and coming.
Great, thank you for adding that in.
Mm-hmm.
So the exciting pieces that you've mentioned are the government supporting the websites, the entrepreneurs are coming up with apps. Are there any other exciting opportunities that you have seen, or any larger gaps that could still be filled by entrepreneurs within that have been brought to light with this crisis?
Connectivity, because like right now I'm in a small village outside Bogota, which is about 1 hour and 30 minutes away by car, and the connectivity is a problem, but I think it's an issue for the government to that with the 5G technology that is going on now. So I do feel that there are gaps. I think this is where kind of like inequality arises. You have poor connectivity. Say, for example, in Bogota, in the main capital cities, we do not have these problems. But if you go outside the main cities, we have a gap in connectivity. A lot of entrepreneurs, rural entrepreneurs, do not have access to knowledge or do not have access to training. So I think this is one of the gaps that COVID-19 has brought up as well. It's like we need connectivity. We need to train more our rural entrepreneurs because they need to be connected. They need to be online. They need to be part of the digital economy. So I feel these are new things that have been brought up by COVID-19.
You're muted.
I can hear you.
Phil, you had a second question. Did you want to go ahead and ask your question? Do you remember?
Yeah, sure. I think Veale kind of hit on some of it. So basically, one of the entrepreneurial ventures that's kind of sparked here in Ohio from the governor's release is the only reason why I know this. But the governor of Ohio has kind of signed a contract with a personal protective equipment in regards to medical supply, like a sanitation container that does approximately like 80,000 masks a day. Has Colombia adopted any such entrepreneurial ventures? Has anything sparked as a result from the response from the crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. Some companies that were producing kind of like alcohol as a beverage, as a drink, they're actually kind of like starting to generate hand sanitizers. Like hands gel for society. So yes, so some of it has been, it's happening similar in the US. I have also read in the UK and in Germany that companies like Colombia, they're stopping like using like alcohol for, for drinks and for beverages. But they're starting to create hands gels, antibacterials. So yes. Also like gloves and masks as well. I've heard of some entrepreneurs stopping their normal production that were doing something different, but they were actually leading by example and starting to produce things that are really, really needed right now due to the virus.
Great.
Nelson, could you speak to your experience with the Great Recession, 2008 to 2012 time period, and how that impacted startup investment in Colombia, and what you anticipate the next, 12 to 18 months might look like regarding access to capital?
Well, back in 2008, I was not living in Colombia, but I know that the startup ecosystem, it wasn't that strong then. Like I said at the beginning, it was from 2012 when the national government started to encourage and to set up new national offices, like new offices to foster innovation and entrepreneurship. So back 2008, there were some, of course, but it wasn't as strong as it is now. And I think what will happen after this is just a period of, the government, all the ecosystem has to get together. We need to come up with new solutions. We need to come up with new ideas. We need to reinvent ourselves. I do feel that it's difficult. There is a consensus around with the people I've spoken to, with the universities that I know that are kind of like, after all this happens, when you get together, have a serious debate of what is next. And what I've mentioned is what is next is actually to bring more technology, to bring more connectivity, because it's one of the gaps that we have noticed. We can't stop. We just need to reinvent ourselves.
And by the way, I noticed, some of our friends potentially from Colombia, others are welcome to jump in with questions or comments. So let's open up the floor either for a question. Oh, Rob's got a question. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rob. I'm a JD MBA here. I know you talked a little bit about the government and its impact on entrepreneurial stuff, specifically with what's going on right now. But I was wondering if you could dive into it a little more, specifically in light of kind of our context of this is looking at our government, and we're seeing a lot of, we'll call them new and creative ideas that we wouldn't have dreamed about taking seriously 2 months ago. Yeah. Is there any kind of extreme measures or political divisiveness going on around the entrepreneurial landscape?
That's a very good question. And before jumping onto this call, I was doing some research. And what I've seen, entrepreneurs are asking the government, because as you know, it's not the same scenario as the United States, as Colombia. Colombia is a developing country. What the government is concentrating right now is to provide for the most vulnerable. So they're providing food, they're providing kind of like attention at in hospitals. But right now, what they talked by the government is being focused on loans, with very good interest rates. The mayor of Bogota, she has been, I've heard her 2 days ago saying, come on, what about the entrepreneurs? And our president, he fosters innovation and he fosters like technology and all of that. But we have not seen any measures really, like, not yet, because we're not at that stage where you guys are, where the peak of the COVID is kind of like going up. Fingers crossed, we will not arrive there yet, because we will not be able to cope as well as you guys are doing. But in terms of measures, what they've talked about so far are, loans with preferential interest rates, and the rent I've spoken to you about. Hopefully in the next few days or the next few weeks, we will hear more from government, because we are struggling. We have been under lockdown for over 12 days. So I know that some of my friends and some of, obviously we are as well struggling, but again, we need to reinvent ourselves. We will see what's next. The government will pose to us, because we are quite concerned. So far, it's just what I've mentioned, the loans and the rents that would be frozen for those that have physical spaces. So far, this is the debate that we have right now. Like I said, right now what the government is doing is concentrated on the most vulnerable, it should be like that. But we need more solutions. Hopefully that debate will be done, or they will do the debate next few days, next few weeks, because it's definitely difficult. Yes.
Thank you.
William, you had a question? Or was that a
Yeah, I was just kind of going to piggyback off of Rob's question, but I think Nelson kind of answered it indirectly. I was going to ask, like, so I'm in the military here in the United States, just going to Case Western to get an MBA, and we have systems here in place that when we have National Guard, which is a portion of our Army, that states typically run along with reserves, that they can activate in support of like major cities if they're struggling, especially with the medical teams they have. I just don't know, like, has Colombia ever experienced something like that, or do they have any system in place, or have experienced a past event? Like, we've experienced past events like with Hurricane Katrina, or we also, or usually any natural disaster that we experience, have some kind of military presence and support from the government. I was wondering if Colombia had something like that.
Well, as you know, we suffer from, and the narcotics, with the war against drugs and stuff. So for us to see the Army out in the streets is very, very normal, in that sense. But I know that in some parts of where I am right now, in Bogota and the region surrounded, the Army is out there helping out as well. Like you say, very similarly, like taking things, like making sure that it's order, people are complying with the lockdown. Also helping with the supplies. I think that they've been very, very good, taking things to hospitals back and forth. The Army, at the beginning, there were only few places in Colombia where the test to identify COVID-19 was being done. So the Army was delivering it by airplanes and helicopters as a matter of urgency. So yes, so the Army is collaborating. They're doing a great job. They are out on the streets in certain parts of Colombia, especially in the center, helping out, bringing things around, obviously keeping the order, but they have been very good, yes. Before we finish, I just know that they set up a temporary hospital in Bogota last week, it will accommodate about 1,000. Hopefully we will not get there, but we are in terms of like the mitigation phase. They set up a hospital here in Bogota that would be used for 1,000 people. But again, they're doing a great job, the Army.
So with a large portion of your community and your businesses in sort of that lockdown mitigation phase, are you finding issues with the infrastructure being able to handle an increased amount of digital commerce, digital communication, digital education?
Absolutely, yes. So the connectivity is a big issue for us. I don't think, I don't think. I basically, we started, I thought, okay, we have, quite connectivity in Bogota. But after this, a lot of people are working from home, like you say, universities are doing online courses. People are on net as well to entertain themselves. So definitely the capacity, there is a gap there here in capacity. So it's a good wake up call in terms for policymakers to know that definitely we need to improve. And again, like I said right before, it's just how we can actually make that transition, because we Colombians, we need to but we need to reinvent ourselves as a country. Currently, we are a commodity economy, but we need to go above that. We need to integrate. We need to introduce new technologies that make us more efficient, more productive, and an economy that adds value. Do not rely just on coffee or oil, on gas. We do need to identify that there's more there, and again, the debate of the fourth industrial revolution, people working from home, new technologies need to be implemented. But again, the gap with connectivity is one of the main ones that policymakers need to tackle.
Thanks, Nelson. I know we have some folks, I don't want to put people on the spot to make a comment, but I know there's some new faces to our class. I see Luis Carlos or Angel or Tata or Sandra. I'm assuming, I know at least Sandra's from Colombia. If any of you want to unmute and make any comments about how you see entrepreneurship in Colombia or where you are, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so I know San and I know Tata. Tata's my colleague, so I think she's been a little bit shy.
Come on, Tata. You're among friends. Anything you'd like to share your perspective?
Hopefully, it's just where she's as well, the reception, the signal is quite bad.
Oh, the signal's bad. Okay. All right. Well, let's see which of my other case students can I put on the spot before I cold call you. Who's gonna make the next comment or ask a question? All right, Dave. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. So yeah. Hi, Nelson. Dave here in Cleveland.
Hi, Dave.
So we interviewed entrepreneurs from Colombia, and one thing that came up in relation to the government was corruption being an issue or being a perception. So can you just give us a little flavor on that, or a little? I know you said you haven't been directly supported by the government, but can you give us a feel for what the perception is of government corruption?
Yeah, I mean, we mainly work with the private sector. Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, good. So we mainly work with the private sector. So we haven't had any issues about it, around corruption. But obviously you hear comments and things about kickbacks, that if you don't for kickbacks, then you don't get the contracts. But as far as I know, we have not been affected. I know that the current government is working on it. And that's a good question, because it's not just Colombia, it's just in Latin America. The corruption is probably a disease that we have, even more than COVID-19, But yes, so on a personal level, and with Project Colombia, we haven't had any issues. Again, we tend to work with the private sector because they're the ones that are willing to innovate more. So, but obviously you hear talk of kickbacks and contracts and stuff, but the government, I know, is tackling it. And hopefully, at the end of this crisis, we will be able to talk again, to sit down, talk, debate, and think that corruption is it's a bigger disease than anything else, and we cannot afford to lose this much going towards corruption, because then we could have thousands of new hospitals, new schools, and prepare for the fourth industrial revolution. So yeah, I appreciate your question, and it's a very good one. It's not just Colombia, it's the whole Latin America. It happens, but it hasn't affected us in any way at all, because we tend to work with the private sector. And I know that the government and even the media as well, the social media as well, people that are interacting on Twitter are very active, going against corruption. So there is a lot of talk about it. The opposition parties are always kind of like checking as well. So it happens, it hasn't affected us. And yeah, that's kind of like what I have to talk about, corruption. Good question. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, Rob.
So all my questions are going to be about the government, because that's just kind of my wheelhouse. But so historically, in times of crisis like this, the government has kind of leveraged its position to gain more authority. Especially in times of crisis. Do you see that being a problem in like the short to near future, say like 1 to 5 years out? Do you think that this could have long-term effects on kind of a culture of regulations that stifles the opportunity for entrepreneurial growth?
Yeah, it could be. We could become after this we could become like a Big Brother society, you know, like the TV shows where, you know, where you're being watched all the time, and, you know, new technologies can track your face, and, you know, people can have you under control. I don't, as far as I see it, from what I, you know, from right, you know, from my perspective, I don't think it will happen. It will happen, you know. I think, you know, our main issue is more like to have better hospitals, better infrastructure. You know, the kind of like these are kind of like the main priorities right now. How to provide food for the most vulnerable. You know, how to get people back to work, but being like having more power, and maybe like introduce technologies to, you know, to follow people around. I don't see it happening. I think right now, I think that's more of a concern that people are having in Europe and like more developed economies, like in China as well, how they're using things to track where you are and stuff like that. But I don't think that's a problem for us right now. You know, we're just kind of like concerned about basic things, economy, jobs. But I don't think, you know, we will become that big society, like Big Brother society, for the next few years. Right now, we kind of like, we need to address the main priorities.
Thank you.
So we have actually a question from our Facebook Live audience. So Ruth, this one is for you. Ruth asks, will this situation cause more poverty in Colombia, or do you think it'll work for a change in the future?
I think it will cause both of them. You know, in a short time, it will cause a lot of poverty, a lot of struggle, because people are losing their jobs. Like I said, we have been under a nationwide lockdown for over 12 days. So obviously people are losing jobs. So for the next, I think this year is going to be very hard for people, for entrepreneurs, and it will cause poverty. I think that inequality gap, it will widen. Again, I think after this, we need to take it as a period of reflection. We need to reinvent ourselves as a society, as a business enterprises. We need to kind of like go onto the digital economy. Now, a lot of Colombians thought, oh yeah, maybe internet is not for me, or maybe the technology is just too far away from me. Now we know that even a small store, a small shop, need to really like go online, you know, start doing deliveries, you know, start having maybe a website, you know. So it will cause both, you know, poverty and inequality at the beginning, but I think it will kick that change that we need. So I think we just, it will be a difficult period, but we to analyze, reflect on what's going on, and hopefully come out of this stronger.
Great. And thanks, Ruth, for asking the question from Facebook Live. All right. Any, who else would like to ask a question? I was texting with Jennifer Rossi. Jennifer, you ready to ask the question?
Yeah, I knew you were going to call me out.
That's how I roll, Jennifer.
Semester 2, round 2. Yeah, actually, this was kind of like a question that's more for pre-COVID-19. I know in the past year, country had government and political instability, along with some civil distress. Did you, other than like training more people, and, you know, obviously the GDP prior to this virus again has gone up in Colombia. Is there anything else that you guys are kind of actively working to kind of attract international businesses and entrepreneurs?
Hello.
I think it's really you were breaking up a little bit, Jennifer. I think the crux of it was around kind of what, you know, because Colombia has been on the ascent in terms of growth, and entrepreneurship, and you know, what has kind of worked well in sort of attracting foreign capital, foreign investors, and even foreign companies to move to Colombia.
I think security. So, you know, security has allowed for people to come back to the country, not just to invest money, just to come and meet Colombians. So how nice we are, you know, how friendly people are, you know, but all down security. You know, I was reading, I don't know, a few months ago, some statistics about tourism. So back in 2002, you know, at the beginning of 2000, we only would have, I don't know, maybe like 300,000, 500,000 tourists per year. That's nothing. And last year we had something like 5 or 6 million. You know, again, forgive me if I'm wrong with the data, but it's something that comes up to my mind. But yeah, so security has allowed people to come here, you know, to travel around Colombia, which is a beautiful country. We are blessed. We have the Pacific coast on the west. We have the Caribbean coast on the north, and we have in the south, we have the Amazons. So we are very, very like beautiful country, really friendly people. So I just think security has allowed for people to come here. Actually, you know, I'm so gutted that you guys couldn't make it to Colombia 2 weeks ago. We had all prepared and organized. All the startups are ready for you guys, but I'm so glad that you guys have continued the business consultancies by online. I've spoken to them and they're so overwhelmed. They're so happy about the advice that you provide. This is an experience of, you know, knowledge transfer. You can learn from us and we can learn from you guys, you know, and the whole, you know, the whole point of this exercise is, you know, is how we can collaborate, you know, how can we actually work towards one goal, which is to make the ecosystem more innovate, and, you know, in which we can generate products and services that add value to clients and a society as a whole. So yeah, I think security has allowed us for you guys to, I don't think we would be having this talk if we didn't have security. And then again, obviously the government has spent money on infrastructure, you know, educational programs. This is how people are actually going abroad to study, to do their master's degrees, you know. But yeah, I feel globalization, you know, for us to be talking right now, and, you know, I think that's how it is, security and globalization and educational programs, which are very effective.
So we have a question from Lawrence, who's a senior electrical engineering student focusing on power systems. And he says, I just heard you mention some of the industries that are being focused on for job creation and entrepreneurship. And as you speak towards implementing and expanding online commerce via websites and strengthening internet connectivity, are there any cultural barriers that you think would make this challenging?
Yeah, definitely. You know, barriers. There are definitely cultural barriers that may be like, but actually this is before I think this is prior the COVID-19, because after the COVID-19, everyone has to get online. But I think that's a very good question, and I love it, because it's not, you know, obviously, you know, Colombian society, unfortunately, we have, you know, the middle class is, you know, is very small. So we have a massive gap between the rich and the poor. So there's a huge problem there with entrepreneurs. But I do feel that the government, what needs to do is to bring, not just in the main cities, you know, technology, but we need to democratize, you know, technology, and actually people, you know, people want to have a better life. But if you go out to the rural sectors, to the rural areas, and then you set up really good programs in which, you know, people can learn about innovation, about new technologies, but also teach them, you know, hands on the job, theory. I just really like them how to really get online. And, you know, there are cultural barriers, I know, but I know that after this COVID-19, I think people are, oh my God, we need to get into the digital economy, otherwise business are gonna collapse. So we definitely need to get online, and the government needs to spend more on connectivity, infrastructure, and training.
So taking that a little bit further, one of the things that has sort of emerged as a theme throughout the semester, as we've been learning more about your ecosystem, is that there seems to be a culture of risk aversion, especially when it comes to investment in new entrepreneurial startups.
Mhm.
So do you think that in light of sort of this lockdown and things coming to a standstill, whether it's private capital, whether it's angels, whether it's the government, do you think that it's going to increase that level of risk sort of aversion, not wanting to invest in new endeavors that are untested, untried, because there's more of a risk that they're going to lose that investment?
Yeah, definitely for the next few months, we will see this. There will be a lot of fear among investors, angel investors, private investors, But Colombia, up last year, like I said, it was an up and coming country, or it is an up and coming country, and the startup world is really up there in Latin America. So we have last year we had Rappi. I don't know if you guys have heard of Rappi. They became our first unicorn startup in Colombia. After this, a lot of American, a lot of foreign investors are thinking, oh my God, it's not just only Rappi. So they're identifying new that are, that are being created and now are being developed. So a lot of investment prior COVID-19 has been done. And I think in the next few months, it will be difficult. Of course, investors might not just want to invest in untested, territory and in startups, but I think it will pick up again. It will pick up hopefully at the end of the year, at the beginning of the next year. It will pick up because we're doing quite well. This is, the ecosystem here, the startup ecosystem is getting stronger, and it will not change. I just think after next year, it will pick up.
So we have about 5 minutes left in the hour. Are there any other burning questions from anyone that's here this evening? Any of the case students, any of our guests?
Nelson.
Hi.
I have a question. In Colombia, does the government primarily own the power grids and the internet service providers? Are they international companies, Colombian-owned companies?
That's a good question. No, we are, a country which encourages private property. So actually, the top 4 internet providers are foreign. So we have Spanish companies, we have American companies as well. But yeah, so we have a mixture. We have Claro, which is owned by Carlos Slim, the Mexican guy. So yeah, so the Colombian market is open up for anyone that wants to invest and whoever meets the requirements. But yeah, it's the private sector is so welcome here.
Great. Well, maybe I'll say a few final words just to kind of wrap it up. First, Nelson, I want to thank you and all those, also the guests who joined from Colombia, even though we didn't hear from you as part of this discussion. I hope that these kind of sessions, which are really wonderful opportunities for those of us sitting in Cleveland, or I know we have some other alums or students that are in other parts of the U.S. to get a perspective on Colombia. I will tell you, Nelson, I think this, we are rescheduled to bring a group of students there for next March. So we
fantastic news.
I'm coming. Unfortunately, Veale and Jen, that were 2 of our students that are on this call that we're planning on coming, are both graduating, but maybe they'll still come with us in their postgraduate way. Because I think I think the work that you and others have done in Colombia have really turned it into a place that is doing some things that the world is really looking at in terms of your economy and supporting entrepreneurship. And then I think this crazy period that we're all in, where everything is kind of come to a grinding halt in terms of a lot of life. I think it even makes more sense to sort of have this interconnectivity with people around the world and sort of sharing stories and I think supporting each other as we look to get through this. And, lastly, because a couple of the students who are on the call are part of these consulting projects, it's been the 9 startups that you introduced us to, just sort of watching the nature of those projects change. So just for everyone's benefit who might be watching, Nelson arranged startup projects for case students to do with Colombian startups. We had planned on being together in Bogota a couple of weeks ago to kind of kick off those projects. And now, because we didn't travel, it's all being done virtual. And then you add in the crisis. So many of these entrepreneurs are wrestling with new issues that they hadn't faced before. But it's been awesome to kind of watch the resiliency between the startups and the students. And I think you mentioned it before, just that kind of exchange is really, really valuable to us, and, you know, hopefully adding some value to the entrepreneurs in Colombia.
Yeah, definitely. Just before I say goodbye, I just want to say a couple of things about empathy, about being human. I think one of the, you know, going beyond technology, going beyond the 4th industrial revolution, going beyond the startup world, I think we will come out stronger than before. I think after this experience, you know, we will have to rate ourselves, not just as, you know, business people, but as human beings. You know, I believe that the most exciting opportunity is to have more empathy towards others, to be more human, and to understand that we are not vulnerable, that we are vulnerable, sorry, you know, and from this develop, you know, we can develop our businesses, you know, as a human-centered approach, you know, to strengthen, you know, and develop new business ideas that add value to society. So going beyond technology and going beyond the startup ecosystem, one of the main, I see it as an opportunity, Colombia see it as an opportunity, how we reinvent as human beings, how we will have more empathy, how we will listen to others, how we realize that we are vulnerable, but we can develop ourselves, have a more human-centered approach, you know, and add value. Not add value just that means money, just add value to society as a whole, you know, what positive impact we can have to our community, to our families, to our countries. You know, I know it sounds a little bit romantic, but I think this is one of the main lessons that we're having going beyond, you know, technology and all the startup world, is that empathy that we need to start having, listening to our customers, listen to nature, you know, and going beyond technology. Just need to know we're vulnerable, you know, and what's after this, we need to just, you know, develop a human-centered approach, be more human. And, you know, it was great talking to you guys. I really, you know, you have a friend from here, you know, here, not just, you know, you guys wanna, you know, if you popping into Bogota, whatever, we can meet for a coffee, no problem. And next year, I will see you guys in March. So count on me, whatever you need.
We will. Well, great. Well, let's thanks Nelson and friends for joining. And yeah, stay safe, everybody. We will see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you so much.